2, 3. What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to a live edition of the NBA Outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, my guy, Kory Waldron. Kory, what's up?
It's Christmas Eve for the NBA world. We got trade rumors. We got trades going on at 1 o'clock in the morning East Coast time. Rumors filled throughout the day. It's the best time of the year for the NBA.
It really picked up yesterday, too. Like, that's when the rumors started to really pop. And then, like you said, we got the trade, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Quick reminder, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube. But, Kory, let's jump into that trade. What was your initial reaction when you saw the news?
Initial reaction was Andre Drummond's not going to the Atlanta Hawks. That was the first thing that came to mind. And then shortly after, of course, looking at how it broke down, because obviously 4 teams being involved. One thing I will say is Minnesota Twitter, you guys overvalued the shit out of Robert Covington, because I know our guy Zach Noble, who's been on the show a few times, has the 4-season podcast. He was like pretty adamant that like there was some sort of way, like for example, in a world where the Pacers would make a trade where they could get like Miles Turner type of value for Robert Covington. Minnesota didn't get much value for Robert Covington. And then you look at it from Atlanta's perspective, it makes sense to get a center. You told Trae Young you were going to get him help. You got him Jeff Teague and Clint Capella. That's a start. And then Robert Covington to the Rockets. They need a center. That's what they've been looking for so far today. But now they have another guy who can play defense, who can shoot threes, kind of fits their rhythm and how they want to play, what speed. And then the Nuggets, also a weird move for the Nuggets, but it felt like they just wanted to kind of get rid of some of their depth issues because Malik Beasley kind of needs minutes. He's been pretty good. It was a lot of moving parts, but I think the Rockets made a good move depending on how they finish this deadline. And then the Hawks, they're just building for the future.
Yeah, I think you look at it from the Rockets' perspective. I think they get some credit and respect for the fact is the team we had going into this season or at the deadline wasn't good enough to win a second-round playoff series or possibly get to the Western Conference Finals. Now they changed some of those parts around, and at least they're coming with something new. And like you mentioned, they're pursuing another center maybe at a cheaper option, so they have an opportunity. At least they're trying to change things to take advantage of James Harden's prime, which I think is a good move by Daryl Morey. Robert Covington's been the guy they've been targeting. I like the Jordan Bell ad, a switchy center that can kind of fit what they're trying to do. I don't think he's the answer as a starter, but off the bench, not bad. Like you mentioned with the Hawks, Clint Capella, center of the future, on a nice contract too. His contract I don't think is an overpay. I think it's a really nice contract for a center of his skill set. And people are kind of concerned, like, is he going to catch as many lobs without James Harden and previously Chris Paul? Trae Young's going to set him up fine. There's going to be plenty of space for him to work with Trae Young in that pick and roll. Minnesota, you got your first-round pick and you got a couple young guys. I think Malik Beasley is a guy you look to move forward with. Herman Gomez is another guy that you could potentially, be in your future. Evan Turner is going to get bought out. Same thing can happen to Vanderbilt. And the Nuggets, like we mentioned on the trade deadline preview show we did on Sunday, they really just wanted to get some type of value for Malik Beasley and Herman Gomez. I think they would have liked to get more, but they got a first-round pick and they got a couple flyers on bench guys. Shabazz might be a guy that can give them a scoring punch off the bench. I know they use Monty Morris, but another option they have. So overall, I didn't think any team did terrible in the deal. Which team do you think did the best?
I think the team that did the best would be the Rockets, which is still weird because I did like what the Hawks did, but the fact of the matter is the Rockets with this move, they still have money left over to go get another guy to fill in, the center role. I would imagine would be who they're looking at. I know our guy Dalton has seen some stuff or has heard some rumblings that they're looking at guys in the Eastern Conference. Some names have been popped up that I'm not going to mention.
No, we can mention them. I talked to Dalton before the show. They've talked to teams about DeAndre Jordan, Jared Allen, pretty much any center that's on the market. I think one name that instantly popped in my head, if they're not able to get the rim runner, but they're looking for a solid center that they could get really cheap, would be a guy like Ed Davis.
Ooh, Ed Davis would be a solid one.
Because Utah doesn't want him. Like, he hasn't played, he's not getting minutes, and he's not going to be the rim running threat, though. That's the only concern with adding an Ed Davis.
Right. No, that's why I thought about a free agent like Joakim Noah.
Yeah.
They're looking for just 15 to 20 minutes, somebody who can bring some toughness. But again, he's not either a rim runner at this point in his career either.
I think maybe a guy like John Henson would be like a cheap option that gives you some of that rim running. But at the end of the day, it's going to be tough for them, I think, to find in a fill-in center that marks all their needs. You know what I mean? They're probably going to get a guy that can do 2 out of 3 things, or 2 out of 4 things, whatever it might be. But at this time, and their limited assets, I think that's what makes it so hard. And like, you have a little fear as the Rockets is maybe they don't get a guy and they have to end up with Joakim Noah, which isn't the worst thing. But still, I don't know how much better of a position you are in now than you were prior to making the trade.
We actually have Dalton in the chat, and he just mentioned right now Tristan Thompson is the top center top center, I believe, for the Rockets to pinpoint. I don't know how the money would work in that.
Yeah, it's a great point, because trying to figure that out was pretty hard. But actually, since we are on live Periscope right now, I could pull up the Rockets books real quick and see what they got going.
I mean, the one thing I will say is, the one thing I see a lot of people forgetting when they do these trade machine stuff, and I was a victim of this last night, Eric Gordon cannot be traded.
Those extension guys are killing a lot of trades.
Correct,
Bradley Beal.
The guys who just signed those extensions can't be traded. Bradley Beal is another one of those names that people love to think about, but you can't move them. And Eric Gordon may be a smaller name, but Eric Gordon's $14 million is on the books. And now looking at what the Rockets have, while you look for the money and stuff, we have Russell Westbrook, Eric Gordon, Robert Covington, James Harden, PJ Tucker as the core 5 right now, with Austin Rivers on the bench, and they still have Daniel House at the moment. So that's a decent group of guys in the Western Conference. It just really comes down to, can you get a center so PJ Tucker isn't going to play 40 minutes at the center and get run off the court? And of course, I think Jordan Bell is probably going to play a big factor in this too. If Kenneth Faried is still available, I wonder if they look to bring Kenneth Faried back, because he had some good success with them playing a small ball 5 last year.
At least until they get to the postseason. I think, like, in the postseason, Fareed's not really much of an option, but at least he can give you some minutes to fill in for the rest of the regular season. And you're right. I believe, talking to Dalton and guys in the chat were mentioning, there is a possibility, I think, if they get another team involved in this trade, that they'll be able to come up with $12 million. So that could be how they try to work Tristan Thompson. I'm not sure the exact details. Obviously, I think there's probably going to be still a couple moving parts in this trade. But Houston's definitely going to try to make some other type of move. And even if they don't get a center, I know they've been pretty active in trying to at least get like another power forward. Guys in our OTG chat have been mentioned, like a Markieff Morris from Detroit, who's just kind of looking to sell everything.
As Dalton just said in the chat, loophole season.
Yeah, exactly. So they're trying to find some little way to get some extra money or another player in there. But any other thoughts on this trade? Do you think this kind of kicked off some other trades? Because, like, hey, there's a lot of moving pieces here.
Well, this move for Minnesota was all on the purposes of trying to get a situation available so they can go after D'Angelo Russell.
Or another point guard. That was
or another point guard was the report that came out today. Last night it was trying to get D'Lo. But there's just D'Lo into the Minnesota Timberwolves just isn't going to work. The gap is too large from what the Warriors return, what their ideal return is, and what Minnesota can offer. And then Minnesota looking at other point guards, I don't see a ton of options out there, or guys that make the guys are going to make an impact for this team. I know Dennis Smith Jr. is a name I've seen popped up a few times. But again, like, they only have one point guard on the roster, I believe, who's on a 2-way contract. So they desperately have to go after a guard. You can't go forward the second half of the season with no guard. And we also have to keep in mind that this team with Karl-Anthony Towns has not won a game since November. And this is when you start to get worried about your superstar and his happiness and all that. But the Timberwolves have to go after a point guard. I don't know what kind of names are out there that they could even target. Maybe they're one of the teams calling for Al Caruso.
Maybe. I mean, I've heard like Dennis Smith Jr. being a guy they're looking to target, or just somebody along those lines. We know that Charlotte's been willing to move Terry Rozier. Maybe that's the guy they go after. I don't know. That's not the move that I ideally look for, but they do need some type of starting center. And it's like, yeah, you made this move and you made some assets for yourself, but nothing too crazy that's going to get you D'Angelo Russell. And like you mentioned, like, I think they're just not willing to pay the price for D'Lo, and I think that's been with multiple teams. Like, there was a report that the Knicks weren't willing to include multiple first-round picks or Mitchell Robinson. Like, yeah. D'Angelo Russell is a good player. Like, we're not talking about, a borderline starting point guard. We're talking about an all-star point guard that's going to get better and is having an even better season than last year.
Yeah, that's the one thing that was funny about the absolute epitome of what the Knicks stand for and what they are what they're all about. Is the fact of the matter is, you've been struggling. You just parted ways with your president. We have these rumblings on trade rumors, and you have the opportunity once again to bring in a nice young player in D'Angelo Russell, which could help you bring in some sort of free agent in the future. Who knows? But you're refusing to send draft picks, and you don't want to include Mitchell Robinson yet. You don't even give Mitchell Robinson the minutes he probably should be getting to help him develop as an NBA player right now. So again, the Knicks are just hypocrisy at its best.
Yeah, I mean, we could go into the Knicks a little bit. They fired Steve Mills, obviously, a few days before the trade deadline is actually here. They've made some questionable moves in the past, firing Phil Jackson right after he made his draft picks. But what do you make of this whole Knicks situation and Steve Mills being fired? And, the word is that, Jim Dolan's trying to pursue Masai out of Toronto, which is kind of a long shot at this point in the season.
Well, I don't know if it is, because Stein reported today that Masai wants to go to the Knicks.
Which I could see like him wanting to go, but I just think it's so hard for it to happen in February.
Right. I would agree. And especially with where the Raptors are this season, why would he want to leave in the middle of the season? And also, I think it's a bad look to leave one team to go to another team in the middle of a season
after you won a chip.
Right, and the success you're having this year, it would be a weird move. But the Knicks are doing what the Knicks do, right? James Dolan had fans booing and chanting, "Sell the team." So he immediately had to make some sort of action, and that was fire the president. Then on top of firing the president, we had these like 3 weeks of where we kept hearing, the standstill point of we are not interested in trading Marcus Morris. And it's just like, all right, like sure. And now Marcus Morris seems to be fully available. And now it seems like everybody's available once again besides R.J. Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. Julius Randle, I think, has been attached to like the Charlotte Hornets in a couple of rumors. Nothing concrete, but it just goes to show that the Knicks just between 1 week to the next, you really just don't know what you're going to get with this team. The direction of it is still so confusing. Like, the fact even I think about this point, you brought this up a lot, when they didn't sign Kevin Durant and Kyrie, and then they put out the press release of we weren't really interested in going after those guys. It's just like, come on, man, let's just be straight up that you guys just keep getting beat by yourselves.
Yeah.
And again, like I saw the rumblings that maybe a Danny Green and Kyle Kuzma deal for Marcus Morris. I don't know if that helps either team. I mean, you would want to flip Danny Green, I guess, in that scenario. I guess you would want to take a chance on a young player in Kyle Kuzma because all of your young players, for the most part, aside from Mitchell Robinson, have almost flopped this year. Dennis Smith Jr., Fernando Quino's had some moments, but Kevin Knox looks like he's going to be out of the league in a couple of years. So, I just don't know what direction the Knicks fully want to take, but they should definitely start moving some of these pieces in the next 24 hours.
Well, I think that's the spot-on word right there is direction. Like, there is just no direction for this team. You don't really know what they're trying to do. And then 1 month they're sending one message, the next month they're sending another message. Earlier in this year, they're like, we're disappointed. We're trying to make a postseason push. We're trying to be, competitive. And now they're one of the worst teams in the league. And they're like, oh, we're trying to hold on to Marcus Morris. Then they fire Steve Mills, like you said. Now Morris is on the market, and he's available to guys. So it's like, what are you trying to do? I think getting a guy like Kuzma wouldn't be a bad move because at least you're getting another young asset, and it's somebody, hey, I can take a chance on this guy. Maybe he doesn't turn into an all-star, but at least it makes me a little bit closer to competitive. That's why I think actually pursuing D'Angelo Russell is a smart move. We kind of questioned in the summertime, like, why didn't they try to make a push for D'Lo in the summer? Not that it would have happened because of the sign and trade, but he made sense because they didn't have a star point guard. And D'Lo also is like a very fitting point guard where I think he could play the 1 or 2 in the right system if you have the right pieces around him. So I think it would be a good move for them.
I was thinking a guard line, if you wanted to keep Frank Ntilikina, like a guard lineup where you have Frank and D'Lo side by side isn't the worst thing because you have a defensive-minded player next to an offensive-minded player. And
it's like when Boston had Kyrie and Marcus Smart.
Right, and Ntilikina is not a bad playmaker either. He just can't seem to hit his shots consistently.
Yeah, his jumper is definitely questionable. That's his biggest issue. Offensively, sometimes he literally just doesn't provide anything.
Right.
So, I mean, the Knicks situation is going to be interesting. If you had to make a call, do you think they are going to get a new GM this month, or do you think it's something we're going to see in the summer?
I think we'll see something over the summer. So I think James Dolan doesn't want to make the wrong move.
Yep.
So I feel like he was going to be as patient as possible. And also just thinking about this off the top of my head, if Minnesota's looking for a point guard, Elfrid Payton wouldn't be the worst guy to target.
Yeah, at least it's some type of – I guess he's almost a veteran at this point. He's logged enough time in the NBA, and you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Minnesota situation is getting ugly, I think. I think a lot of people don't want to mention it, but, like, would not be surprised, like we've talked about, if Cat demands a trade this summer.
And and I want to say this. This was an interesting, a little bit off topic, but the Jump was talking about this, and Rachel Nicholson was talking about, should Karl Anthony Towns demand a trade. I just want to say, it's really borderline toxic behavior that we have players who sign 5-year extensions with bad teams, and then a year later, when they're not a good team, that we're calling for them to demand a trade, or we're wondering when they're going to demand a trade, and the players themselves are wondering when they're going to want to finally get out. It's just a really bad cycle that we have players get these extensions with bad teams, and then so short into their new deals they want out, or we're starting to speculate on when they're going to want out. It's fun for entertainment, and it's good for what we do podcasting wise, but it's borderline toxic behavior that we kind of push stars to get out of bad situations as quickly and soon as possible, even though for their career themselves it may make sense.
Yeah, it's really a tough topic, because I think some of it is are you signing up to a situation that you thought was going to improve, or is this a situation that really was going to happen? I think a guy like Kevin Love in Cleveland, he knew they were not going to be a good team.
Right, he saw Kyrie and LeBron gone in a calendar year.
Yeah, you knew, and then just they're rebuilding, they're drafting all these guys. You weren't going to be good over the next 3 years. So unless you had a agreement with the front office, hey, within a year or two of this you're going to trade me, or as I get my value up, or you'll be willing to move me, I think it gets a little bit more interesting, or harder to gauge with young players, with a Karl Anthony Towns, because you could make an argument he signed that extension and he expected Minnesota to get better, or to take a stride and at least be a playoff team, where they have substantially, you've probably argued they've gotten worse since last season. They have not taken any strides forward. They haven't really got any players. And like we just talked about, they don't even have a competent point guard right now. So if he's upset, I can understand Karl Anthony Towns being upset. I think the veterans, you kind of knew what you were getting into. Even Bradley Beal, let's be honest, Bradley Beal, there was no chance the Wizards were going to win a chip over the next 3 years when you signed that deal. That whole John Wall situation, him coming back, and then just the lack of the talent and assets on the roster, you can't expect to win a chip there. But I'll give the younger players a little bit of a pass, not as much for the vets.
That's fair, I think.
Now, moving on to some rumors, since we gave the Knicks enough time.
Yeah.
What has popped up? Let's talk about a guy that popped onto the trade radar today. Kelly Oubre Jr. Suns are taking calls.
Yeah, I must be missing something. I got to be missing something, because I don't understand necessarily why he's on the market. This is a guy who I think every time I'm on OTG basketball Twitter, whether I'm on, I don't know why I said that like that, but whether I'm on the OTG Twitter, my own Twitter, if I'm watching a Phoenix Suns game, I'm generally enjoying the productivity I'm seeing from Kelly Oubre Jr. on both sides of the floor. Now, I had a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and they mentioned Kelly Oubre Jr. does have some questionable shot selection, and I'm not going to disagree with that. But I think that's just an assortment of needing to be more developed. And the fact of the matter is, on a losing team like Phoenix, sometimes you just push and you want to be the guy that turns things around. But him being on the market is interesting, because he's he can play the three. He can play a small ball four. He's very athletic. The three-point shot is a part of his game now. He's a high flyer, a decent defender because he plays with aggression. I wouldn't be surprised now if he's actually on the market if we don't see a trade for Kelly Oubre Jr. because I think a lot of teams would be interested in him, especially in this day and age where wings are so important.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting player. We saw, like you mentioned, move from Washington to Phoenix. He's had some really good moments in Phoenix. I watched him play the Nets the other night, and he has stretches where he's like, wow, this can be a really good player. But then there'll be a stretch later in the game sometimes. I feel like his basketball IQ really pops off, like you mentioned, taking some bad shots or just kind of jacking up stuff, and where it's just not necessary at this point. It's like, who's aiming for Kelly Oubre Jr., do you think, in terms of the trade market? Is it, a team looking to add, for that playoff push, or more so a young team looking to take, a flyer and thinking they can develop him into a better player?
If I could see this as some kind of play to try and get D'Angelo Russell.
Not the worst idea, because there's an argument there's a fit with Golden State. I think it just has to be Phoenix. Are they willing to give up the draft assets to acquire Russell? And it seems like Golden State wants at least 2 good first-round picks.
Right. So I could see that as like a dark horse. And then think about other team that could use Kelly Oubre Jr. I guess both LA teams technically, but I don't think he fits the timeline of necessarily. They probably want, obviously, a more proven vet.
little more polish.
Right. And then, I mean, youth-wise, you know, maybe this is where we see Kevin Love get traded. If there's some sort of scenario where Kevin Love gets dealt to Phoenix and Kelly Oubre Jr. is heading to Cleveland with an assortment of other young guys, like
Don't hate it.
Project. You know, and maybe that's how Kevin Love and the Cavaliers get back in the trade talks. But I can't think of anyone else on the top of my mind that Kelly Oubre Jr. immediately screams like this would be a good fit.
I don't hate the Cleveland idea. I think it's a way for Cleveland to sell, like, hey, we got to go to a young player that we think could, quote unquote, maybe be an all-star. I don't think that, but they could sell it to their fans, and they could maybe get like a fake first-round pick that's heavily protected, a couple seconds, or they could throw Dario Saric in the trade or something like that just to add a little bit more pop. So Cleveland feels like they're not paying to give up Kevin Love. So, I mean, I wouldn't rule that out.
I mean, maybe Detroit too, in some scenario where maybe we did see
Luke Kennard.
Right, we saw the Luke Kennard rumor. So maybe there's some kind of package in place where, Luke Kennard and Kelly Oubre Jr. are the centerpieces of a trade going elsewhere. Obviously their money doesn't line up. I think Kennard's only making like $2.8 million or $3 million. So, and that Oubre's I think almost $17 million or $18 million.
They could figure it out, though. I think.
Yeah, you have to add pieces, but it's not a bad fit for Detroit if you're actually trying to rebuild to get just a different sort of young player in the mix.
Yeah, I agree, and just maybe somebody you feel a little bit more confident about. Or it's interesting they are looking to get rid of Luke Kennard. I think it's just like, he's one young player in your roster that's actually pretty good. I guess the talk for Detroit, Twitter's been mentioning that they don't want to pay him when his contract's up, but that's not for a few seasons. So it's just like you're kind of rushing to do this.
It's got my attention for some OTG trade deadline stuff that will be coming out later today for myself.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get a three-point shooter that has a little bit of an offensive game, I think why not? You know what I mean? It's not like he's just purely a shooter.
Yeah, shoot 6 threes a game and shoot 39% on 6 attempts. That's pretty damn good.
And a team in Detroit that really doesn't have much spacing other than himself. So let's talk about Jrue Holiday. There's been some rumblings, if you've been listening to any Zach Lowe or, Woj pods or stuff, that Jrue Holiday is a name that continues to get brought up, but it's really like unsure if New Orleans is willing to move him or they want to keep him or they're asking for such a high price. What's your thoughts on Jrue?
Well, I mean, from what I saw today watching the Zach Lowe and Wojnarowski, trade deadline show, whatever that they did, is that Jrue Holiday they're just not interested in moving him unless it's for a very hefty return. As of right now, the Nuggets are one team that really want Jrue Holiday, but they haven't been able to match whatever this hefty offer or this hefty price for Jrue Holiday is. Obviously, we know the Pelicans have done wonders so far through trades, the last couple they've made, in particular the Anthony Davis trade, which got them a ton of young assets that have seemingly all panned out while having a bunch of draft picks now. But they don't want to lose Jrue Holiday for nothing. They also probably still think they can make the playoffs. They've been playing better basketball as of late. But I don't see any team offering a crazy amount for Jrue Holiday, because even though I'm a big fan of Jrue Holiday and the defensive impact he brings to the floor, his playmaking ability, he is a streaky scorer, and I don't think he can be your number 2 best player on a championship team. I think he's closer to your 3rd.
Yeah.
And I think that's why certain teams are just hesitant to pull the triggers, because you're not necessarily bringing in a guy who makes you title contenders. He might just push you in the right direction. I don't know if teams are willing to give up that much for a guy like that.
Yeah, he's not, and he's also just not having his best season. It's kind of just been all over the place a little bit. And I think you're right. I think we're seeing, maybe New Orleans is overvaluing him, or maybe it's the fact that David Griffin, like you mentioned, just had so many great trades that he's really not trying to get into another trade unless he feels like it's super favorable, because that's what he's been able to do over the last couple times.
Yeah, and like we said when Zion first came back, I think the Pelicans want to see what they got, right? They want to see what this team looks like fully healthy, all pieces together, because then maybe next year Zion's another year older, Ingram's another year older, Lonzo's another year older, and you still have Jrue and Derek Favors as your veterans, and then maybe you make a run and you're actually a real threat in the Western Conference. So I just don't think David Griffin has any need to jump the gun.
Yeah, agreed. And I think they could also just wait to the summer. If Lonzo, Brandon Ingram, and Zion look amazing, trade them this summer.
And I think the issue with the Nuggets not pushing for a Jrue Holiday trade harder is because I think if this was Bradley Beal we're talking about, I think the Nuggets go all in. but I think they're more hesitant because they know that Jrue Holiday isn't the same offensive weapon as a Bradley Beal, who kind of fits their system better. So I think it's also that they almost don't want to shoot themselves in the foot on the possibly getting Bradley Beal this summer or next year.
That's a great point. And I think Bradley Beal does give him that little bit more of a pop. It gives him that clear offensive threat that can get you a bucket at the end of the game, where sometimes Jokic just isn't quite as aggressive, a little bit harder for a big to carry you down the closing stretch. I like that idea. What do you think in terms of other names being on the move? Do you think we'll see any all-stars or bigger name players get moved, or Robert Covington and Clint Capella were the two biggest names?
I mean, I don't think we can rule out Atlanta Cleveland. I think we can rule out big name wise for Kevin Love, but I don't think we can rule out Detroit yet. Derrick Rose, Luke Kennard, Andre Drummond. These are three names we've seen a lot the last month or so. Drummond's market has definitely shrunk since Atlanta picked up Clint Capella. Drummond might be the one guy who doesn't get moved. But looking at a guy like Derrick Rose, we have a lot of point guard holes across the league right now. Derrick Rose today also, not sure if this is anything, dropped out of the skills challenge.
Thought that was interesting because it's in Chicago.
Right, it's in Chicago, hometown. I don't know if maybe that's just because he wants to rest his body more. Rest his body more. I don't know if that's because he wants to rest because he knows he's going to a competing team now. Like, I don't know what that is, but I think Derrick Rose is an interesting name to watch. Luke Kennard. I think Detroit would be one team to watch. And then outside of that, thinking about other teams, the Warriors have some interesting pieces outside of D'Lo. We've been talking about D'Lo a lot, but Kevon Looney, Glenn Robinson III, Alec Burks, all three of these guys could make an impact elsewhere. Glenn Robinson III, GR3, has been playing some really good basketball, some of his best shooting splits to date of his career. Teams obviously need 3-and-D wings. That is what he does. Burks has been a good shooter. I could see a lot of these role players moving. When it comes to big names, I just don't see a lot of destinations for guys like Andre Drummond and Kevin Love, because that's the issue. A lot of the big names on the market this year are bigger, are bigs. And there's just not a desire to trade for bigs on big contracts. And one guy I just thought of in my little spiel of big men would be Aaron Gordon.
I was going to ask you. That was my next question.
Right.
What do you think about Aaron Gordon?
We've heard rumblings of, obviously, crazy good defender. At this point, it almost feels like collectively we all think Orlando isn't using him properly. Because they almost make him rely on his jump shot, which is not the strong part of his game. Probably should be in more pick-and-roll opportunities, kind of like a Draymond Green for the Warriors. Still crazy athletic. Will be in the dunk contest again this year. There could be a scenario where I see him traded. I think a deal for like San Antonio, for example, maybe giving DeMar DeRozan in some sort of package to Orlando to bring in Aaron Gordon and make some sense. But again, Aaron Gordon's also a guy making $19 million where, him not being able to shoot is a weird fix for certain teams. I could also see maybe Phoenix wants to take a knock on him just because they want to add maybe a more defensive-rounded or defensive-minded player in Aaron Gordon.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that fit either. I think Aaron Gordon's an interesting player, and I think it makes sense for Orlando to move on. I don't think they're going to be aggressive in terms of trying to move him right away at this deadline. They might wait till the summer because I think they've realized that it's not the best possible fit. Any thoughts on the Andre Iguodala situation? Do you think he gets moved, or is he pretty much locked in Memphis to the end of the season?
I could see a petty scenario in which he doesn't get moved and then they buy him out right before the playoffs so he can't join a playoff team.
Yeah, I could see that. It seems like it's almost kind of likely at this point.
Yeah. This whole situation in general is very weird. I don't even know where you stand on it. We haven't really talked about this. But the fact of the matter is, anytime a player's, he's getting paid $17 million and refuses to play, I don't know how I feel about that when he's going on a press tour and he's on all these talk shows and, pretty much just not playing basketball even though he's under contract. I don't think we've seen something like this before in the NBA. And some people are just like, it's Iggy, it's not a problem. And other people are saying where he's on a contract. So technically, I think his contract should be voided. If he's not showing up and he's doing press tours, I think his contract should be voided personally.
Well, they told him not to show up. There was an agreement between him and Memphis when he got traded that he was going to stay away from the team. So it's it's a really tough situation.
What kind of agreement is that, though? Not to cut you off. I don't even know. Why would you say that? We don't want you around.
Well, I think they both wanted to move him, but I think there's two problems here. Iguodala is trying to say I'm only willing to go to X team, and that being the Lakers or the Clippers. And then also Memphis is trying to get a first-round pick for Andre Iguodala. Andre
Yeah,
Iguodala is not worth even a late first round pick. He's worth maybe like 3 years ago. Like, I also don't understand. I think, like, why is Andre Iguodala being so hyped like he's going to be the deciding factor about who wins the finals? Like, he hasn't played basketball all season long. Like, are we even sure he's that good anymore? No disrespect. I know he's a finals MVP. But even, like, the last 2 seasons, we were, like, starting to question, like, how good is Andre Iguodala? Is that contract going to come back to bite Golden State?
I mean, that's a good point. I've even seen rumblings where it's like Iggy knows he's going back to the Warriors after this year, so he just wants to rest.
There's a video that started circulating that was from the Golden State run, and it's like, could you guys imagine playing for any other team? And they're all, like, laughing, and it's like, he said something along the lines is like, KD's not the one laughing.
Yeah, I was about to say, KD's the only. They're like, why would I want? He was like, this is the bar, right? This is the bar if you want me to play for your organization. It's got to be like this. Like, I don't want to play anywhere else. And Kevin Durant's the only one not smiling, not laughing, like, yo, I'm getting the hell out of here, which is funny in hindsight.
It is. I mean, at that point, like, we all should just analyze that video and been like, yo, this dude is out. Like,
yeah,
he just. I don't know. They must have just rubbed KD the wrong way, because it doesn't even seem like he just is out because he wants to be out, but just because he, like, doesn't think that's the best of the best.
I just think he also, I mean, you know, again, a little bit off topic, but I think KD just felt not disrespected, but he realized after the first 2 titles in that 3rd year that he just wasn't getting the same respect as the other guys, you know, maybe more or less because he joined them after they were already in the finals. I know that tiff he had with Draymond was like a really big indicator of things to come. But, you know, it's still weird to look back on that whole saga.
I agree. I think you notice it more now, and as he's gone, and when they lost last year, it's like, okay, they wouldn't have probably won those other chips without KD, or it would have been like 7-game series with Cleveland. But that's for a whole nother podcast. Maybe you and John can touch on that at some time.
Yeah.
Anything else, though, Kory, before we get out of here? Obviously, we'll be recapping the trade deadline tomorrow, possibly going live again.
I don't think I have anything off the top of my head right now. It'd be interesting to see, like, teams to watch would be like the Philadelphia 76ers. They had some interesting quotes today during their Al Horford saying, you know, we're dealing with some locker room stuff. We're going to keep it internal. Well, just so you know, Al Horford, we all know now that there's shit going on in the locker room, bud. So thank you. And I also saw a lot of the jokes, you know, from Celtics Twitter saying, whoa, like maybe it wasn't Kyrie. Maybe it was Al Horford that screwed our team last year. I don't believe that's the case, but yeah, I don't think it's either guy. I just think it's a mixture of players and, you know, attitudes and mindsets that just don't always work out. But I think that was interesting. And also Joel Embiid kind of saying that he's been trying to fit in rather than play his own game in Philly. So I think Philly's a team that needs to make a move. Nothing has to be a big move, but some sort of move for Philly I think is incoming. And then, you know, it'd be curious to see what one of these LA teams pulls the trigger, because it seems like the Clippers and Lakers both want Marcus Morris, or even Markieff Morris is another low-key name out there. Which team pulls the trigger? What?
A lot cheaper.
Yeah, a lot cheaper. You're not going to get it the same value, but you know, maybe one will get Markieff and the other will get Marcus, and we'll get, you know, a Morris brother battle in the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, some twin matchup. Maybe they'll share a home in LA. But yeah. When they were at Phoenix, they shared a home. They shared a bank account. They have all matching tattoos. So there's some info on the Morris twins. Getting back to Philly, though, with Al Horford, that situation is really interesting. And what it tells me is, like, I just am speculating here, that there's some type of entitlement almost. I felt like that team with the Boston team last year, they went to the conference finals. They thought they were already good enough to be a championship team. I think the Philly team thinks like, oh, we're so good. We just lost to Toronto on some crazy 3 last year. Like, we're right on the cusp, and they're not playing the right basketball night in and night out and developing these habits. And I think that can aggravate, you know, a player of Al Horford's experience. Yeah,
that's a good point. I mean, that's not a far-fetched speculation, especially because of the, I don't want to say the attitude of
arrogance.
Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Those two guys already kind of have the attitude of, we are, you know, the best players in the NBA, or the best player at our position. You know, they certainly have that mindset going in. And Al Horford is a winner. He's won, you know, I think he's made the playoffs every year of his professional career in the NBA, or just about every year of his professional career. So these are all guys that are based around winning, and they probably did think going in, like, you know, this is a team on paper that we're going to stop everyone defensively, and we have Embiid and, you know, Tobias Harris probably to be the 2 guys to lead us scoring-wise, while Ben Simmons just orchestrates. And we've seen that just hasn't worked out, and the bench unit just hasn't been great. It just goes to show you that you can't play with all forwards and bigs. You have to have some guards on your team.
Roster construction is a big deal, and I think that's something that's kind of undersold, and I think that's something undersold by fans at the deadline. Everyone comes up with trades, and it's like, how is this guy going to fit with your team? How is his role going to fit with your team? You know, like a guy having a 25% usage rate with one team, and then the next team he has to be a role player or the third or fourth option. It's going to be different, and I think people forget that.
That's my big concern and issue when I see the Lakers proposing Danny Green and Kyle Kuzma for Marcus Morris. Now, Marcus Morris' numbers are really good, but he's also in the New York Knicks playing in a role where he is the #1 guy, basically.
And carefree too, because there's no pressure to win.
Exactly. So he's got an automatic green light. He's got a high usage rate, and his numbers are going to be slightly inflated because of the surrounding cast. You put him in the LA scenario where he's playing with LeBron and AD. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't sacrifice, but I'm saying those numbers of shooting 43% from three probably dip because he's being used differently and not having the ball in his hands as much. So I think that kind of stuff plays a factor in it, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I think I don't like to criticize players, but I think a lot of players are being overvalued at the deadline just for the fact that there's so many limited options that teams are willing to overpay because they know they need that much more to get to a championship. Marcus Morris is a guy that I just feel like is getting a little bit overvalued because of the points you mentioned, and like over his career, he has been streaky. It's not like he's an all-star player and he's just in a bench role or a smaller role in New York. I'm just not sure he's going to change that much of a dynamic for you, especially like you mentioned. You're giving up Danny Green and Kyle Kuzma. Green obviously has been inconsistent shooting the three, but he's a veteran. He's a championship-level player that I think you want to have on the roster. Yeah,
it's almost a wash. I don't think that trade makes the Lakers any better because you're also losing depth because you're losing Kuzma
two players
Green, who both play big minutes for your team, and you're getting one who can play more of a three role, but it just doesn't fit well.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of losing Danny Green because I like the fact of having, you know, that guard/small forward that can chase guys around, where Morris is more that 3-4. And I think the Lakers already have enough bigs unless they're like trying to switch up how they play basketball. I think it makes a little bit more sense for the Clippers and how they play, but still I don't think it's like, yo, Marcus Morris is going to be the reason we win a championship. He might give you a little bit of a push, but I don't think it's like, oh my God.
It only makes sense if when it comes playoff time, it was a lineup of Anthony Davis at the 5, LeBron at the 4, Marcus Morris at the 3rd, and then you have, you know, KCP at the 2, and I don't know. Without Danny Green, I guess, I don't know, is Rondo starting in the playoffs?
Yeah, Alex Caruso, like...
Hey, there's still a lot of holes on this Lakers team when you think about it.
I think it just makes more sense for the Lakers to pursue somebody like Bogdanovich from Sacramento. Like, that just makes so much more sense from playmaking and shooting.
Well, I think, you know, this just, you know, jogged my mind. You know, where Darren Collison goes.
Yeah, it's between those two teams, Clippers or Lakers.
Right. So that's going to be another big move because, I mean, that's, you know, I may not actually miss Danny Green and Kyle Kuzma too much. If you trade for Marcus Morris, and I know for sure Darren Collison's going to the Lakers, I probably feel a lot better about that trade.
Yeah, and then also it's a fact is like Collison's been out of the NBA for half a season. Like, is he still in shape? Like, what is he going to pop for your team?
Of course, the reports say that he is, but you know, what's he going to say? No, guys, I'm not. I've been eating bonbons and ring dings on the couch the last 6 months. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think we both agree that Lakers, Clippers, and Sixers are almost a lock to make a trade.
Yeah, I think those three are desperate. And actually, I'm not going to say I don't think the Rockets are done. I would put the Rockets in that mix.
They need a center. They're going to make some type of move.
You can't go forward with what you got. And I actually, you know, not that anyone cares as much, but Minnesota has to make a move too because you can't go forward without a point guard.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota did, but I'd be surprised with Houston. Sacramento might be another team I'm close to locking in for a trade. I don't know if they necessarily are going to lock to move Bogdanovich, but it seems like they want to move Dedmon. They've been active in trade talks. It just seems like a team that wants to get out there. And I think with the Knicks, like firing Steve Mills, maybe he was the one saying like, oh, we want to keep Marcus Morris. I think they're probably another team that's almost a lock to make a trade.
Yeah, even if it's not a big trade, you know, I think Elfrid Payton, you know, Wayne Ellington,
Dennis Smith Jr.,
Reggie Bullock, you know, even a Taj Gibson. You know, Taj Gibson wouldn't be a bad choice for the Knicks. I mean, for the Rockets to target, right? If they're looking for some sort of center, still kind of plays small, but is tough. Taj Gibson probably gave you some minutes there.
He can rebound.
Yeah, and I think the Knicks are an interesting team. I mean, we had them pegged as the one team before the season that when it became this time of the year, they were going to be the team that vultures were going to be picking apart for pieces. And we're right on the cusp of it. I don't know why they want to hold on to any of these guys besides R.J. Barrett and Mitchell Robinson long term, unless you're getting a D-Lo.
If you asked me before the season, how many picks are the Knicks going to make this year before the deadline, I probably would have said at least 3. I would have said 1 first and 2 seconds. And at this rate, they'll be lucky to get 1 pick because they're going to run out of time.
Yeah, they'll be lucky to get 1 late second-round pick.
Yeah, it's just like crazy. What did you think about the speculation on Charlotte and New York talking about a trade with the likes of like Julius Randle, Dennis Smith Jr., Terry Rozier, and I forget who the other person was involved.
I mean, Terry Rozier, to his credit, has played decent this year. I don't think he's going to be worth that money long term. But this is also the move that screams to me like the Knicks are like, we got to get a point guard. Again, this is one of the most critical positions in the NBA is point guard. You need someone to run your offense. I don't think Terry Rozier necessarily is the guy, but he has like the kind of grit and mentality I think that New York fans would love.
Yeah.
From a point guard.
Exciting.
Yeah. And then like for Charlotte, I mean, I don't know why you would want Julius Randle to clog up your books. And, you're about to buy out Marvin Williams, who I think will be an interesting guy as well on the market when he hits, if he does get bought out, that is. Julius Randle can play some offense. He can rebound, but we've seen some of the worst Julius Randle this year. Defensively, he's not that good. He's been streaky, I think, offensively for the most part. Devontae Graham and Julius Randle as your 2 pieces going forward, I'm not overly thrilled with that. I don't know if it makes any sense for Charlotte. But then again, Charlotte let Kemba walk for nothing, so I don't know.
It's like the move to make Charlotte like a little bit better and like more competitive, but like long term, nothing ever comes of it because like it's Julius Randle, and we kind of talked about over the summer. I mentioned like I just don't think he's necessarily a winning type player, more of like a 6-man role or a 4th or 5th option where you don't have to depend on him. Like when you have to depend on him, not it.
The only thing interesting about a Knicks and Hornets, trade talks is the fact that you have 2 of the worst NBA owners in the James Dolan and Michael Jordan.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, anything could happen between those 2, like in terms of bad contracts. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Anything else? Any Pacers thoughts you want to get out there before the deadline?
I mean, the Pacers are attached to one rumor, and that's that we are trying to trade TJ Leaf. If you know me, if you follow me on Twitter, then you know when the Pacers drafted TJ Leaf, I was furious because I didn't want him. I wanted OG Anunoby, who went, I think, 2 picks after to the Raptors, which would have been a much better fit in today's Indiana.
It would have been great. The Pacers would be looking like maybe like contenders right now.
Yeah, right? They have a defensive wing like OG, but they went with TJ Leaf. They want to give TJ Leaf the opportunity to play basketball because he's just not in the rotation with the Pacers, doesn't play much defense. He actually can hit threes. He's kind of like a smaller version of Ryan Anderson. Decent rebounder, can stretch the floor, but plays no defense. With what the Pacers have right now, no defense doesn't fit. McMillan is going to play you if you play no defense. So they're giving him a chance possibly to go elsewhere. Personally, I want the Pacers to add a shooter. Definitely check out tonight, HOU+ATL+DEN+MIN, because I'm going to have a trade deadline marathon piece out where the Pacers add shooting in a hypothetical trade. The Pacers are 30th in 3 points attempted and 29th in 3-pointers made. In today's era of NBA basketball, that is not a winning recipe for the playoffs. If the Pacers make any moves at the deadline, it's got to be for a shooter. But again, I don't think they're really willing to give up any pieces because they still want to see, kind of like the Pelicans, what they look like healthy since Victor Oladipo is back and actually will be starting tonight and will be playing up to 28 minutes for the first time this season tonight.
Good, and I think that's going to help Oladipo start to get back in rhythm because it's just so hard when you're playing in short minutes and like shorter stints when you're used to playing the most minutes on the team and having the ball so much. So hopefully Oladipo gets back. That's like a trade deadline addition in itself. If he can get close to his all-star level we've seen last year, then it's a wrap for the Pacers. But just to give a little knowledge on the Nets, I mentioned earlier, Dalton told me that Rockets have reached out in terms of trying to make a move for Jared Allen or DeAndre Jordan. Jared Allen, not going to happen. Obviously, Houston doesn't have the assets. Talked to another source that mentioned the Nets are really highly unlikely to trade DeAndre Jordan because of his ties to Kyrie and KD. It'd have to get essentially approved by them, so that's highly unlikely. I don't really see many Nets moves. I know it's been reported earlier in the week that Woj said they're active on the phones, but like we said in our preview, I think it'd be more so for the type of like bench depth, and then in the summertime they might make more of a splash move because they're another team that has contract extensions with Taurean Prince and Karis LeVert. It just makes it so much more difficult. And then Kyrie being out, you can't really afford to trade Spencer Dinwiddie.
The question would be, and of course, do you think Claxton has the possibility of being moved at all? Maybe in a deal that attaches Prince, because you don't want to maybe extend Prince past this season.
Well, they have Prince extended already for next
Oh,
year, so his number is going to jump from whatever it's at, like 4 or 5, probably to like 11 or 12.
okay, okay.
And like Claxton, the Nets value very highly. Like Claxton has showed some stuff already in his small time in the NBA that he could be a really, really good player. And like given that the Nets probably are going to move picks moving forward when KD's back trying to upgrade the roster, I think that'd be the one young piece they want to keep an eye on because they're not going to get the value that they value him for. You know, if that
Right.
makes sense. Like they value like there's some people I think in the Nets organization that think that Nick Claxton could potentially be an all-star down the line. But like
Ooh.
at this point, he's super raw. Like Kenny Atkinson said, he has a little bit of Chris Bosh in him. I'm not going to a Brooklyn Buzz rant, but Claxton has an interesting skill set because he ran the show offensively at Georgia, and he's 6'11", so he has some guard skills and a big body.
That's definitely interesting.
But that's enough for the Nets, and like we said, we'll be back tomorrow recapping the trade deadline. And head to OTGBasketball.com. Like Kory mentioned, he's got some pieces dropping. We got a ton of great pieces on there, probably over 30 proposals at this point. And like I mentioned earlier, you can find the show on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGBasketball.com, and YouTube.
Peace out, knuckleheads.